to thank you for inviting Audit USA for being here and to do this presentation. It's a real honor. I want you to know that you're the oldest commission in the country that meets like this and oversees elections. And we're looking to try to help assist again, starting some other commissions, hopefully in Santa Cruz County, in Cochise, Pinal, and follow the model that you all have built. Because it really is important in these times that we get people to fight the cynicism in this country that's going on when it comes to elections. We started Audit AZ 20 years ago, became Audit USA. Speaker is going to go ahead and be Bill Risner. And Bill Risner and I go back from the very, very beginning of Audit USA. And he's going to explain somewhat of the history that Arizona, probably 12 to 15 cases together over the last 20 years. Basically, when we do litigation, we do mostly writs of mandamus. And we challenge people to say, gee, Your Honor, could you please order that person to follow the law because they're not? Or public records requests. You know, we have a strong conviction that elections aren't any good unless they're transparent, trackable, and publicly verified, more now than any time. And what we're here to do is to get you to understand this program that we built called ABE. And I want you to know, we didn't build the program. They probably spent, I don't know, $30, $40 million. Microsoft did. And Microsoft Excel, we're gonna blow your mind what you can do with it. And all we did was we knew what buttons to push, and we built a macro. And we're gonna show you how it works. We have a 5-minute video, because I wanna fumble on a computer pushing different buttons. I'm gonna show you how simple this program is and what it can do for counties who use it, because when you sign that certified report, we're gonna have a system that you don't have to go to the boxes to get ballots. You can go directly to CVRs, and this system will wind up building one CVR, all hyperlink. You're gonna see a video here that in 93 seconds, we hyperlink 736,000 images into the CVR, and you just click on it and the image pops right up, and then you can follow the whole row. Ken's gonna explain all of that, and Bill. I'm gonna have Bill come up here. He's gonna minutes, and then Ken will come up and he tells a really interesting situation about elections and his experience being a past election. So anyway, Bill.
Thanks, John. And it's better for me to be able to talk to people that advise our Board of Supervisors on elections. Because, you know, in the Arizona Constitution, there's a specific provision that says increased democracy. Whoever gets the most votes is elected. And it's the Board of Supervisors that run our elections in Arizona. The Secretary of State certainly sets some rules on how ballots are transmitted and things like that, but the responsibility is the Board of Supervisors. So it's nice to be able to talk to people who can advise them, because I've had a lot of history with them. I wanted to mention a little bit about my background. We moved to Tucson when I was in 4th grade, so I've certainly been here a long time. But I'm from Eastern Kentucky, a little town, 120 people, 2 T intersection, 2 dirt roads. My dad had a general store, but he was elected to the legislature from there, and he wasn't around much. My mom's running the store. That's where the post office was. We had a porch out front, and I pretty much grew up sitting on the porch talking to people. And because they come and they talk and they whittle, and as a little kid, I picked up the attitudes. And certainly there was a strong attitude about elections and what the proper role of people was in that were in office. So I became a lawyer in 1968. In 1970, I represented the Democratic Party in Pima County, challenging a redistricting by the Republicans that were temporarily in control. And we were successful in that challenge. I handled a number of cases since then. And, you know, I was part of a group that was trying to kind of clean up the elections in the county, shall we say, you know, with rules on what the computers are connected to, one thing or another, to make sure that we could improve the accuracy of the elections. You know, one of the things that's difficult about elections is that a lot of people like to cheat, you know, starting from the earliest in our country. There's a history of that. But it's different. It's different than, let's say, criminals that try to steal or something. Some people are paid to cheat, but it's patriots that generally is the biggest problem. Because people that think that they know what's really in the best in public interest, and if other people knew what they knew, they would agree with them, that sort of thing. So we have two of those things. We need to trust democracy, and we need to, everybody needs to know on winning and losing. So at one point, I'd tell you about a case, we call it the database case, where finally the Democratic Party in Pima County asked the Board of Supervisors, we want to look at your computer saved data of past elections. And it was the damnedest thing. The county probably spent $1 million defending that. It was unbelievable. I had one deposition of just a guy that took a photograph, and they had 3 lawyers in the room for this thing. But there were a couple of interesting aspects of it. One, of course, the county attorney represented the Board of Supervisors. The Democratic Party didn't want to sue over this. They passed a resolution unanimously asking the Democratic-controlled county to cooperate with the party and not make a sue to get the database. But we had to sue. And then I wanted to take the deposition of some workers of the election department. Pima County attorney filed a motion and said, wait a minute. Every single person in that election department will take the Fifth Amendment. I was kind of astonished because, you know, I'd seen that motion where you want to take someone's deposition and it may come into some criminal area, and then that person, you know, has a First Amendment right, and they get a Fifth Amendment that they can remain silent. But here the Board of Supervisors says every single person in that election department could take the Fifth and could so forth. So they actually lost the motion. I got to take depositions, and sure enough, each one of them talked about what went on, and there were crimes. Of course, you know, nothing happens because that's where it goes. But it was interesting, and then during the case, the Pima County wanted to take the deposition of the office of the Secretary of State. So there's a provision where you can do that, and then the Secretary of State put forward a guy named Joe Canfield, who was very knowledgeable and who was the election director at the time, as the person who would answer on behalf of the office as to what their policies were. So I asked Joe, well, the county had some questions, and I had some. I said, has your department ever looked at any county in Arizona to see what went on in the elections by checking the computers out or anything like that? He said, oh no, we've not done that. And he said, of course, you don't know of any county that's ever done that either. But what was interesting to me was he said he couldn't do it because they didn't have the authority as Secretary of State to check what each county was doing in terms of the computer. I said, well, you know, you set rules about what can be connected to the computer, work, what room it's in. You have certain rules like that. Did you ever check to see if they're following those rules? He said, no, we don't have authority to do that. So it's really, and I think it's true, because the authorities relate to, they have is how ballots are transmitted, how things like that. But the responsibility for doing it right is the Board of Supervisors' responsibility, and they can't come in and check on you. During that database game, it became obvious to us that why they were fighting so hard was frankly because they cheated on the RTA. That was our working conclusion. We didn't have any evidence because in Arizona, after every bond election, the counties have to burn and destroy the ballots in 6 months. It's quite clear that that law is the case. But it turned out, much to our surprise, Pima County had kept those ballots, and they were in Iron Mountain in storage. So we had a lawsuit saying, hey, we want to, well, no, we didn't have a lawsuit. Pima County had the lawsuit. Pima County said, oh boy, we gotta destroy those ballots, but it'd look bad if we just burn them up, you know. So why don't we ask the judge what we have to do? And so they filed a declaratory judgment action and say, Judge, there's a question about what our responsibilities are with these ballots from the RTA. And then they sued the Democratic Party, the Green Party, and the Republican Party, so these parties can come in and talk about it. Well, on behalf of the Democratic Party and the Libertarian Party, we said, hey, wait a minute. We think that you guys cheated in that election. There's a lot of evidence, and we want the court to take control of these ballots, and we want to look at them because we have some suggestions for what needs to be done in the future, as they need to be scanned and so forth and so on. So, oh boy, that stirred up a maid. So the county made a motion to dismiss the case, and then the RTA came in, and the RTA said, boy, you know, and this was a motion to dismiss, and what it is in the law is they say if we proved everything that we could prove, you still can't be in court. So the whole thesis of the motion was, yeah, they cheated, but sorry, they can't be here. So the RTA guy said, boy, you know, you gotta consider how important all these people are on the board, and if it finds out that that election was cheated, imagine how they'll feel. And then the county says, well, you know, you can't be here in court. And the judge says, yeah, I think that's right. You know, maybe you can go to the legislature or something, but you can't come to court just because the election was stolen, and that's nothing we can hear. And that judge was Charles Harrington, who was a fine man. He was, in my opinion, maybe one of the best judges in our court. But when it came to stand up against the establishment, he folded. So he dismissed, saying you can't come to court. And then, of course, he was an elected chief judge. The judge said, you're our top guy. So the Court of Appeals reversed, and it came back. And then we got from Kyle Bryson, who's very congenial judge, and so Bryson said, boy, the county makes the same motion again. So we're there again where it's assumed that the election was rigged. And he says, you know, you want to scan these ballots, you want to, there's things that would make so they couldn't cheat, but you know, really I don't have power for that. Most I can do is just tell them not to do it again. And so he dismissed the case. And he was elected, of course, thereafter chief judge. So there's a couple lessons for me, which is that you need to make sure that the elections are run right in the first place, because there's nobody that's going to stand in the way of a rigged elections. With some of the best judges wouldn't do it, and I don't think they'd do it tomorrow either. There are things that you can do that to make sure that the elections are correct, and John's going to talk about some of those things later. But really the responsibility to protect democracy, the responsibility to do the elections right is here in each county. That's how it works in this state. Thanks.
When it comes to counting, that is a public process, and I remember, you know, Bill is a brilliant attorney, and he's done some incredible research for us. And going back to in the early days before we had the lever machines, how they counted votes, and you know, when the polls closed, people would come in, they would hand count, and then they would wind up having a string set up, and they'd punch a hole in the ballot, and people could walk by and take a look at it. That's how, you know, it's important sometimes to look back. Anyway, here's Ken Bennett, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce him too. That's what he is, guys. He really is. I can't believe this guy, you know, working with him. The experience that we shared together in a foxhole, okay? Yeah, because we were in a foxhole. We were the only two real experts inside.
He's talking about the Maricopa County audit in 2021.
You got it.
All right, I'm done. Okay, and since that turned around,
friend.
okay, good. Let's get on. Oh, you're probably wondering what's the telephone. We have a dear friend in Prescott who finally had to move out of her home. She's 98 years old, and on her wall was one of the old crank phones. Someone was asking about that just a few minutes ago. Yes, the Millers, right? Okay. Anyway, she gave it to us and took a picture, and somehow John pulled that down off the internet, and that's the picture I'm now associated with. But anyway. Okay. I was the 18th Secretary of State, 2009 to 2015. I think that happened because I had been a state senator in 99 to 2007. I was in the Senate working with Ted Downing. I don't know when you were there, Ted, maybe a little later, but
we did stuff together.
I was president of the Senate 03 to 07, about the time that the RTA election occurred down here, and lots of controversy, and this commission was formed as part of that. Because I had worked with then Secretary of State Jan Brewer, when the whole debacle occurred in Florida, 2000, the hanging chads. In 2002, Congress passes the Help America Vote Act. Some call it the Hack America Vote Act, but it's the Help America Vote Act. And because I had worked with Secretary of State Brewer, when she became governor in 09, when Janet Napolitano left to be on President Obama's cabinet, she appointed me Secretary of State to finish her term. I had recently accepted, about 20 days ago, a position as chair of the Board of Audit USA. Now originally, my first interactions with John Brakey were I started hearing from my Secretary of State staff that there was this big controversy going on down in Pima County, and there were a couple of guys, John Brakey and Jim March or something, stirring up troubles, and I tried to keep an open mind, and sure enough, over the years, we've gone from being skeptics of each other, perhaps, to we ended up being the Republican and Democrat liaisons in the audit that the state Senate did 3 or 4 years ago for the Maricopa County election in 2020. So we have come to the conclusion, and he's known this long before I did, that the problems in elections are complicated, or appear to be, but the solutions are simple. It's basically transparency and verification. And kudos to Pima County for being the first county in the country to create an election integrity commission like you sit on, to assist, as Bill said, the Board of Supervisors, which really has the power in Arizona state law to conduct the elections in each county. Yes, the Constitution identifies the Secretary of State as the chief elections official of the state of Arizona, but the work really happens at the county level. John mentioned ABE. It's basically using Microsoft Excel with some macros that go get stuff from here and get stuff from there to simply create a transparent way of making sure that the votes on the ballots, which are visible in the ballot images, have been correctly recorded in the cast vote record, the record of the votes cast. So we call it ABE, but it basically allows election officials to do 2 things. For years I would hear, well, in elections you can have speed or you can have accuracy, but you can't have both. Well, we need to break through and realize that that's exactly what the public demands. They want speed. I mean, everything's, you get in a line, and if your food isn't in your car in 45 seconds, it's free, or some of these places that used to do that. So they want speed, but of course we want accuracy. And so what we're trying to do is help, and it's extremely critical whenever there's a close election. If there's a blowout election, nobody cares. My first elected opportunity to serve was in my hometown of Prescott. It was 1984, I was 25 years old, I ran for the Prescott City Council. And there were 3 seats available. One guy got more than 50% in the primary, so he got elected. The other 2 seats went to the next 4 of us. We had a runoff. I happened to get the most votes, but the second guy won over the third candidate by 3 votes. 3 votes made the difference between somebody winning the seat on the Prescott City Council or not. And whenever there's a margin in an election, you divide that by half. So it only took, if 2 people in that election had voted for the third guy instead of the second guy, it would have been a different result. So in close elections, transparency and the ability to publicly verify what happened and that we did it accurately is important. Verifying results down to the precinct level. A lot of talk about, well, I mean, there's a bill in the legislature, and it'll probably will be vetoed by the governor. So the Republicans will turn it into a ballot measure that will be on our ballot next year to go back to forcing everybody to vote at the precinct level. So there's this big push for doing everything back at the precinct level. No voting centers. Go back to the precinct level, and the precincts can be no more than 1,000 people. If that bill were to pass, either by a vote of the people, or if the legislature and the governor were to sign it, Maricopa County has 2.6 million registered voters. If the maximum precinct size was 1,000, they would have to have 2,600 voting locations every time they have an election. Right now they have about 250, and they use voting centers, and you can vote wherever you want to vote. Anyway, so a lot of focus at the precinct level. We want to be able to verify that the number of voters matches the number of ballots. Compare the votes in every contest to make sure that the ballot images, the votes on the ballot images, are the ones that were recorded in the cast vote record. look at probably what are the potentially problematic areas: undervotes, overvotes, write-ins. Write-ins almost never decide an election. But if you have races that are being decided by, well, let's see. 2 years ago, the Attorney General of the state of Arizona won an election, statewide election, by about 200 votes. When you have elections that close. Now, I became Secretary of State in 2009. And let me tell you why this is so passionate to me. In 2010, my first statewide election that I had to oversee as a Secretary of State, there were several ballot propositions on the statewide ballots in all 15 counties, and one of them, I think it was Prop 208 if I remember, it was this little bitty thing that changed the filing deadlines on when to submit petitions for things, and so it was not a big deal, and sure enough, after counting about 2 million ballots statewide, that proposition was losing by 126 votes out of 2 million. And I can remember like it was yesterday, my Deputy Secretary of State, who's now a Maricopa County Superior Court Judge, Jim Drake, coming into my office. He says, "Secretary Bennett, for the first time in the history of the state, we are going to trigger a state statute that says if a statewide election is within 200 votes, winner or loser, you have to do a statewide recount." And I go to bed that night, and I'm an accounting major, and I'm thinking, okay, 2 million ballots. We got to count them again. If the second count is 99% accurate to the first count, we could be off by 20,000 votes. If we're 99.9% accurate in the second count to the first count, we could be off by 2,000 votes. If we're 99.99% accurate, counting the second time to the first time, we could have a difference of 200 votes, and instead of the thing losing by 126, maybe it won by 74. And I, as the Secretary of State, would have to stand up in front of the state of Arizona and say, "Sorry, we told you that failed. We recounted and it passed." Now, how much confidence would that instill in Arizonans to announce that just one recount changed this election? I did not sleep that night, thinking, I've got to call 15 county election directors and county recorders tomorrow morning and tell them, get all the boxes back out, get enough machines back out to program them to recount, and we got to count 2 million ballots. Well, we did that. And luckily, about a week later, when all 15 counties had reported their results, the results of that election changed by 42. Instead of losing by 126, it lost by 168. Well, at least it was the same result. And we went looking. We looked at every one of the almost 1,600 precincts in 15 counties of Arizona. Where were there differences? In 99-point-some% of the precincts in all 15 counties, there was no difference between the first count and the second count. Exactly the same. There were a few here and there that changed by 1, changed by 2, and some went this way and some went that way, but we get down to page 36 in Maricopa County, and one precinct changed by 30 votes. So I called the county recorder and the county election director from Maricopa County. Ladies, what happened? Well, we don't know. So they called the 8 people that worked at that precinct that day. Finally, one guy says, I think I know what happened. At about 11 o'clock, I looked behind the machine and there were a bunch of ballots on the floor. Somebody had set the door of the machine so when you fed the ballots in, instead of going down into the hopper, they had gone out the back of the machine and were on the bottom, on the floor. So we decided that in an abundance of caution, we'd run them back through again, make sure they were counted. Well, in doing so, they probably double counted those 30 or 40, ballots. When they recounted the election a week later, they didn't make that mistake. And so that one precinct changed by 30, The whole state changed by 42. If you subtracted that one precinct of 30 from the state changed by 12 votes out of 2 million. I think that's an accuracy percentage of 99.9994% or something. But that's how close elections can be. Okay, see if there are enough questionable votes to alter an outcome, and maybe that helps you reduce litigation and calls for recounts or whatever. Okay, I just want to share my 5 key principles or steps or whatever for ensuring elections with integrity. One is integrity in the voter registration system. Now, this can mean different things to different people. You know, some people are totally focused on, you know, has the voter proved citizenship and on and on and on. To me, integrity in the voter registration system is as simple as state law already says that the list of voters and their names and addresses are public records. Yes, there's about 8,000, I think, Arizona voters whose names are allowed to be redacted and their address because they're battered wives, or they are judges, or they are police officers, or whatever. But the other 4.3 million Arizonans, in every county, we know a name and we know an address. With that level of transparency, you can go to a county and say, okay, in Yavapai County, how many Kenneth Roy Bennetts are there? And even better, you can go to 2150 Ewan Drive and see that, is there a Kenneth Roy Bennett registered there? If so, fine. If there's a Kenneth Roy and a Ken and a Kenny and a Ken Roy and a Ken R, and then we got a problem. Now, in some rare occasions, there might be a Kenneth Roy Bennett Sr. and a Kenneth Roy Bennett Jr. So just verify that election that I talked about, that we verified the statewide recount. We did this at the Secretary of State's office. We took the database of how many voters voted at any particular address. Usually it was 2, 3, 1, 4. We hit a address in Maricopa County, 438 voters at one address. We thought we had discovered some big problem. We run out there in our cars. It's a retirement home. And there were 600 people that lived in it, and 438 of them voted in the election. No problem. But at least you check. Second fundamental principle is, once you've made sure that the voter registration system is who it is, you make sure that only people from that list are voting. Pretty simple, but one of the things that's captured in an election is who voted. Not how you voted, of course, but did you vote, yes or no? It's called your voter history. And every time an election occurs, every voter in the registration system gets a yes or no as to whether they voted in that election or not. Everyone that voted in an election should have been on the registered voter list. Third is, does the number of ballots equal the number of people that voted? Pretty simple, but needs to be verified. 4, and this is what we're basically here talking to you about today, is we've developed a tool. We're not trying to sell it. We're just trying to make it available. If you don't want to use our tool, there are some other tools around the country. So we are not here as a vendor trying to convince you, to convince the Board of Supervisors to use something. We're just saying that we have a tool available that helps primarily in this number 4 key area. Every time a ballot goes through a machine, the machine takes a picture of it. And then the programming from the election management system is basically looking for black dots in certain key locations on that ballot image. And black dots in certain places mean a black dot here is a vote for Smith, a black dot here is a vote for Jones, a black dot here is a vote for Garcia. This critical step is basically saying, look at the ballot images and then look at the record of those votes that's in a spreadsheet called the cast vote record. A spreadsheet has rows and columns. And each row Each row is a particular ballot. Row number 100 is the 100th ballot that was processed in the election. The columns are Smith and Jones and Garcia and Bennett and Brakey and whatever. And so if you look at ballot 100 and you see that there's a vote for Smith in this race and Jones in that race and Garcia in that race, you go to the cast vote record and simply confirm that it recorded a vote for those people in those races. That's all that's happening here. There's a fifth kind of cherry on the top. If you ever needed to, you can use the paper ballots to verify that the ballot images were captured correctly by the machines. But those, to me, are the 5 keys for a transparent, trackable, and publicly verifiable election. There's other things that are important as well, but those are the main 5. Here is a cast vote record. Here's ballot number 1. Now, this is public information from Dane. No.
Yeah, this is.
Dane?
Yes.
County, Wisconsin? Is this?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe it is. It could be, I forget, but it's, yeah. We got 2 counties up here.
Yeah, we'll show you some data that's publicly out there, some counties. And this is not a new thing for some counties across the country to publish their ballot images and their cast vote record. This is from Dane County, Wisconsin. From a race in what, 18, 20?
This is 2024.
24?
It's just
Okay.
recent.
Okay, so a row on the cast vote record is the ballot. Ballot 12 was the 12th ballot that was processed in that election. And the columns are the choices that they made. We don't know who voted ballot 12, but on ballot 12, they picked Cox and Schiffinelli for governor, they picked Glassman for controller, and on and on and on. And if you pull up the image of ballot 12, and if you have a system, and that's what ABE does, ABE takes a big file of ballot images, which the county keeps, and the cast vote record, and it simply correlates them. And it hyperlinks them so that you can click on one and see if it's reflected in the other. And this is what ABE does, and ABE is not some big thing that we spend a lot of money. As John said, ABE is basically using Microsoft Excel with some macro programs to say, go get this from there. So you got to tell it, okay, here's where the ballot images are in this folder. The cast vote record is in this folder. We want you to put those together and give us the results in this folder. And that's all ABE does.
Okay, we're in the file folder, and we're going to go ahead. As you can see, I'm highlighting this right here, Pima County. Okay, that's the test we're going to do. And we're going to do Dane County, Wisconsin, the 2024 election. Okay, so now I am going to go ahead and click on this. Okay, and I'm going to use version 3.6, and I'm going to open it up. Open. Okay, now nothing up here says I've already checked it. I know that I've activated the macro, and Excel will accept it because I gave it permission. You can read these directions, but time is of the essence, so I'm going to go fast here. Click here on this orange, click here to start, okay? Yes, I want to continue. And what I'm going to do up here right now is that let's get ready to tell it how we're going to run it. And it says to me, click to select the folder containing the ballot images. So I'm going to click on that. And then I'm going to go to my C drive again. And once I do it just one time, I should be in good shape. I'm going to go ahead and get those ballot images. And you know, it's asking for file A. So let's find A. Oh, there it is. And then right down here where I'm moving it, you can see Dane County ballot images. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. Now, I'm going to wait for this cursor to stop and say select OK. B. Now I'm going to go to B. This is Dane County. Results produced by ABE. This is where we're going to store them. Okay, and then I'm going to say OK, because right down here you can see this is lit up. So I'm going to say OK. The cast vote record that's looking for the database because it needs to know where it's coming from and where it is. So I'm going to go to File C, and on this one I'm going to have to double click it, and there it is, and then I click on it. Then you can see it's lit up down here. It says the best. So we're going to open that, and now that is entered. Now this screen pops up, and I just minus it down because it will come back later to be used. To select ballot log, it's at, yep, ballot log database, going for that. Then I'm going for the cast vote record, the CVR database, and it's got to know where to look and where to find this stuff. And then where it's marked precincts, that's what we're working with. And then we're going to create CVRs, hyperlink to all ballot images, and we're going to keep them all together. We're not going to separate by precincts, because if I do, that will take about 40 minutes, okay? And we have 368,000, I'm circling right here, 26 records. And we're going to hyperlink them twice, and we're going to find all the missing ones will be outlined in red. I'm going to turn a clock on. Okay, that's the one I was looking for. Sit down, and I'm going to put it right here because we want to see how long it takes to go ahead and hyperlink 700,000 records and put them onto one sheet. Now, if I was going to do precincts, like I said, it would take about 40 minutes. Okay, so I've got this thing already. I'm not going to do unders, overvotes, write-ins, or separate by precincts. That's another run. I always run this first to have a master sheet all hyperlinked, because I'm going to look for undervotes, missing, you know, let's put it this way. You do the presidential race and you find that, gee, look at all the blank ballots, okay? And then you find, if you check them sometimes, that people have circled the circle, they haven't filled in the bubble. It only works if you fill in the bubble. That's how it works. So anyway, I'm going to hit start and continue, and now we're getting ready to go. Okay, preparing CVR files for processing. You'd be surprised how fast this thing can go. Process indicator, adding links and highlighting names. 50 seconds. When it gets to the end, it's going to ask, do I want it combined? I have that built into it because let's say you decide to run ABE on a separate computer, let's say the day after the election, and you're still counting votes and you got 80% done. If you want to start processing that 80% and look for problems, you can. And then when you get final, you can run ABE again, collect all the data, and then it will combine one with the other, because you don't want to lose the work that you already did. 1 minute and 28 seconds. Like I said, there's nothing to combine. No. Done. 1 minute and 36 seconds. That is pretty fast. There are 646 missing ballot images and 645 missing individual CVRs. We have an explanation for that about it. Dane County was the first election county in the country that we talked into posting these ballot images online for the public.
Okay, so what it did, there's 368,028 rows, but up at the top there's 2 title rows. So we accounted for 386,026 ballots. And now the ballot image is associated with each ballot. And you can click on that image and see the ballot image and see that did they vote for Harris or Trump, or did they vote for Baldwin or Olson, and now you can basically side by side on a screen, you can look at a ballot image and make sure that the votes on that ballot image were correctly recorded in the cast vote record. It's about the same thing.
Next, what I'm going to do is something that I think is just quite incredible. And I'm going to show you how we can take the CVR and get the results off of it by using Microsoft Pivot. So you follow me on the mouse. I'm going up here to Insert, and I'm lighted up column H, because that's what I want to look at, is column H. And then I'm going to here, and these are recommended pivot tables. And I'm going to use the top one, and it's going to wind up spitting out the results. And here we go, very quick. Okay. And now it's going to open up a new tab, and here it is. Now, what is incredible about this is, first off, you see it matches 368. We know we have that many records, and then I'll have a chart over here eventually in the next slide that will show how this thing all matches up. But what's really slick, you can see it's sheet 1 now. I'm going to move it over here, and its results, R-E-S-U-L-T-S, okay, Pres. And now let's take a look. Wow, this is a pretty heavy result, but this is incredible. Watch this. I'm going to click on the number, and let's say, well, gee, there was what? Let's look at undervotes, okay? There was 1,410. I'm going to click on that, okay? Wow, look what it just did. It just opened up all of them with undervotes, and it's telling me where they are, that I could go ahead and identify and take a look and see, gee, is that a real undervote or no? And I don't look at undervotes this way, but on a close race that's really close, you can segregate all those undervotes and take a look at them in the race that you want to look at. And this is all undervotes for the president's race, okay? So I wanted to show you that. And of course, there has 3 rows up here on the top, okay? Now we're going to pull it down to here and subtract the 3, 1, 2, 3, okay? And it says that we have 1,410, is that correct? Let's take a look. From this one, 1,410, that is correct. So that 1,410 matches, and I can click on any one of these and do that and open up a separate sheet that we can go back and audit. So we would look at overvotes, you could look at this U blank undervote. That was interesting what we found. It was just a blank box, and what they really were was write-ins that were Mickey Mouse, okay? And I'll hit that one real quick to give you a look, okay? And here is all the U blanks. And what's a U blank? There was nothing there. And we want to account for everything.
So now you've put all of the undervotes in one place, and you can go through and look at it. And we're going to see some examples in just a couple more slides of how undervotes occur, sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally by the vote. And if you have a race that's decided by 2 or 3 votes, you may find some undervotes that were actually, Arizona's a voter intent state. If there's a question, the county election officials have to try to decide what was the intent of the voter. We'll see that here in a second. Another thing though that you get is you get some information about the different kind of ballot styles. And in this county, for example, they've got a voting jurisdiction out of 368,000 voters that voted. So there's probably, what, 500,000 registered or 600,000? They've got 2 people that are in somewhere where they have their own ballot style just for those 2 people. Because they're in this city council race, but they're in that supervisor district, and then they're in this school board district, and they're in that water district. And by the time you figure all that, sometimes you end up with 2 people in a district, you got to print a specific ballot style for 2 people. Now, most of the other people, there's 38,000 or 32,000 people that use ballot style 56. These, if you had selected, I want a separate ABE cast vote record by precinct, then you can create it this way, and you can go in and look at each precinct. But I'm going to move a little forward here. Now, you may have seen there that there were some missing ballot images. Well, in Dane County, Wisconsin, it's a split county, and some precincts are in a different county, and so they have this funky thing in Wisconsin where one county will count the votes for the next county because some of their people are in our, anyway. And so there's Green City and Jefferson County are kind of split between 2 counties. So the counties figure out that the 561 people that are in those areas is the difference between how many votes that were counted and the total that was on the cast vote record. Let me see if I can find the one that here's the one I'm looking, okay. This is an example of an election report that would be printed by the election management system. Pima County uses ES&S. So this is an example of a precinct. This is, now we've jumped to Somerset, Maryland. And this is an ABE report, and you can see that it's coming up with the same numbers. 447 for this governor and lieutenant governor pair, 332, 332. So obviously we're trying to verify the accuracy of one thing by seeing if the results are the same when we run it under a different system. Here's some example of undervotes or write-ins. If you fill in the box that it's a write-in, now two election workers from different parties have to look at it and say, okay, this person wrote in Gregory Padgett. Was Gregory in Arizona? You can be a write-in candidate, but you have to do certain things to be a qualified write-in candidate, and then we'll count votes for you. If you're Jonathan Tyler and you just wrote in your own name or your brother's name or somebody, and you're not a qualified write-in candidate, we don't count votes for them, and we don't count none of the above, and usually the biggest one is Mickey Mouse. And Donald Duck usually takes second. So there's write-in issues. Here's an interesting example of a voter in Maryland was voting on all of these constitutional amendments. And instead of filling in the bubble, circled. Oh, these were candidates. Instead of filling in the bubble, Chris Van Holler, or whatever this was, circled the name and circled the bubble. Did that 14 times. On 13 of the 14 times, no mark crossed through the bubble, but on one of them, it did. And so it only recorded a vote for that constitutional amendment. All these other votes for this voter were as though they had not cast it. So if you had a race though that was decided by one or two and you had to go back and look at the write-ins or these undervotes, these would be undervotes. Here's overvotes. Vote for one and they voted for two. Vote for one and they voted for five or four or whatever. Now, if they fill in the bubble, the same for everybody, you can't tell which one they, but maybe you hit one that has a hesitation mark where they touched the pen, lifted it up, and then said, oh no, I really wanted Dan Cox. Would you count that as a vote for Dan Cox? I would. If I was sitting at a table and somebody said, we're trying to determine voter intent here, I'd say Dan Cox. If I go back, I can't tell whether this, I mean, the mark for Dan Cox and the mark for Wes Moore are about the same. I can't tell that. But on that one, this might help you determine that if the adjudication people decided that this vote went to Dan Cox, okay, we're good with that. There's overvotes. I'm going to go a little quickly here. This is another report that comes out of an election management system, Somerset County, Maryland, 6,958. I think this was, John picked this one because you can show it, you can do something with 6,000 or 7,000 voters in a few seconds. And you can check by precinct, and there might, I don't know how many precincts they might have had, and pick up what we're talking about. Now you can hyperlink a ballot image and the cast vote record. And you can say, over here, there is a vote in this race for Terry Evers, or Tony Evers. Tony Evers was reflected as the vote recorded in the cast vote record. In this race, is it Josh Call for Attorney General? Yes. What's on the ballot image matches the cast vote record. You want to do that on one ballot? You want to spot check Every 15th one, you want to pick a whole precinct and go ballot by ballot, or do you want to check all 6,942 or whatever they were? Other kind of examples where that person their vote was not counted because they circled the circle instead of getting a mark of blackness inside the circle. And if Donald Trump lost or won in this jurisdiction by one vote, that'd be a big deal. That's it.